hope you all had a very good consolidation week and also an Easter break. I hope you actually had a break and didn't eat too much chocolate, or maybe that you did eat too much chocolate. That can also be a good thing, I find. So we have bunnies all throughout our fridge still at the moment, so I'm slowly drip feeding them to myself. Anyway, with no further ado, week 7, we're on to human security. This usually proves to be a very popular theory for assignments because it is more intuitive. However, I just want to emphasize it's still an approach. It's still a theory, which means it has principles that you need to choose when you're looking at analysis. Most of this is going to fall out of your readings, but I posted a very short video. It was less than 3 minutes on human security this week. I encourage you to look at it. It's always nice to start with something very high level and simple. There were 4 points I wanted to emphasize with regards to that video. One was that there's multiple issues that can come under the banner of human security, almost anything that can, affect individuals or large groups of people. But 2, these tend to also cross over national boundaries or have the potential to cross over national boundaries. 3 is that the focus is on how it impacts individuals and groups and also on prevention. So, for example, usually domestic, national or international governments and groups such as NGOs will come together to discuss human security issues and work out how to stop spreads or how to prevent them from happening in the first place. And that leads me into the other 4th point, is that the main concern for human security is not only because it affects individual security. I mean, that could be something relating to what happens in your own household, for example, but the main issue is what is called the domino effect. So we see, for example, with failed states, this might fall off and impact in terms of creating a migration crisis, for example, which will cross over borders. So that's what we call a domino effect. Or the AIDS as a virus, can spread into other communities and start to put pressure on health systems and even see whole economies fail. So we've seen that in parts of Africa going back decades ago now, before there was some measures to improve the health outcomes around that. So there are 4 main points I want to draw attention to. Now, if I was to take an example of something like migration, what would a human security approach mean as opposed to a traditional approach? Now, think about those 4 points I just made. So, firstly, they cross over national borders, for example. So, whereas a traditional approach to migration would be concerned about border security, how do you have undocumented arrivals and still guarantee security from terrorism and other threats? A human security approach actually looks at the human impact on both the refugees and the communities they go into, and the fact that the massive growth in displaced peoples across the globe, what kind of risk that presents and what it means and how you prevent it. And that would sort of focus on global solutions for resettlement, for example, or how to manage growth in refugee camps. So that's sort of one way you would look at migration. Now, it's also a human security issue because of, I already mentioned, the domino effect. It crosses over borders. It can actually put pressure on other economies. For example, most forcibly displaced people in the globe are actually settled in refugee camps in the world's developing countries, the poorest countries. The least are settled in the developed world. So that creates domino effects for those nations where, in their neighbouring countries, there's really huge civil wars, for example, which pushes out refugees. I already mentioned prevention. So in terms of migration, you have global forums discussing it. You have forums in the ASEAN region. You have forums in the African region. You have UN forums, all devoted to saying, what do we do about this growing migration crisis across the globe, which is very different, again, from the traditional security approach, which says, we'll discuss this as a sovereign nation, we'll come up with our own laws, and we don't necessarily need to comply with international obligations to secure our borders. That's our choice. So you can see that taking a human security approach does definitely have implications, and as I said, there's a whole range of issues that could come under that. This week we focus on pandemics, failed states and migration because they're very topical issues, so you can by all means choose one for your essay too if that's something you want to look at, and also for assignment number 3 coming up. Anyway, thanks very much, everybody, and keep engaging on the Q&A board for assignment number 2, asking questions, sending me an essay plan if you need to, and don't forget that under the Q&A thread for assignment number 2, there is the recording of the collaborate we did before consolidation week, and also the theories table I posted, just with a few basic assumptions belonging to each theory, just to help your thinking. Thanks, everybody.